in humiliating fashion, and he was ousted. And in his place, the Western countries, especially America, which was taking a more prominent role at this time, the British Empire was sort of in decline. They put in power a man by the name of Reza Pahlavi Shah. The Shahs had been the rulers of Persia for thousands of years, although during the 20th century they were out of power. So they brought back the position of the Shah, and they installed him as the leader of Iran in 1953. And the Shah was very westernized in his approach to government. He wanted to turn Iran, which is, like we said, a historic civilization that had a proud sense of traditions, and it was very religious in the Shiite form of Islam, which is different from the religion of Saudi Arabia and most of the Gulf countries, which is what's leading to a lot of the problems today. But he was very antagonistic toward the religious leaders known as mullahs in Iran, and persecuted them, and was living a life of luxury. It was rumored that his wife bathed in milk, and he used to get his lunches flown in every day via the Concorde jet from Paris. He used to have his lunch flown in from Paris. Meanwhile, most of the people in Iran were starving. His secret police, known as the Savak, were particularly brutal. I mean, to the same extent that the KGB, the NKVD were in the Soviet Union. And the Savak was very brutal. It persecuted political opponents of the Shah, and so this whole situation was bubbling now. All this anger and all this resentment was bubbling in Iran from the time that the Shah was put in power in 1953 over the next few decades while he was in power. So put yourself in the people of Iran's position. You had a leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, who was going to give you back your own natural resource, and then a foreign country overthrows that democratically elected leader and puts in place what you perceive to be a dictator at that time, a king. And the king goes around exploiting the country for its own benefits, trying to change and co-opt the culture into a more Western orientation. They were showing pornography in the movie theaters. And it was just a mess in Iran for most of the Iranian people. Some people were benefiting from this, most people who were Western educated or who saw themselves in the future as living in the West. But for the average person on the street, for the average Muhammad on the street, it was not a good situation to live in. So that type of situation was unsustainable. That had to change eventually, and things started really getting to a head in the late 1970s, and especially in 1978, 1979, around the turn of the year. There was a lot of different groups that did not like the Shah. There was the Fedayeen, there were the radicalized Muslims, there were Marxists that were backed by the Soviet Union. There was a group that was sort of a combination of Marxism and radical Islamism. And then there were military officers who didn't like the Shah too. So there were all these different actors and stakeholders in Iran that didn't like what the Shah was doing. And so to cut a long story short, in 1979, the situation got so bad he had to leave the country. He was effectively overthrown. He fled the country. I think first he went to Paris. He ended up in America. He had cancer, and he was getting cancer treatment in America. In Iran, a mullah, or even a higher position than a mullah, an ayatollah, a religious leader, an Islamic leader, who was living in Iraq, his name was Ayatollah Khomeini. He flew back into Iran and had the support of the general population and became the de facto leader of Iran, and later the de jure leader of Iran. And he demanded he demanded a few things. Number one, that the Shah would be brought back to Iran to face criminal proceedings and probably to be hung for all of his crimes against the Iranian people. And he declared that that was the end of Western influence in Iran, that they were going to reprioritize Islamic traditions. And so all of the people that were Western-oriented in Iran were in big trouble. A lot of them tried to flee the country. There was a lot of scores settling from the 2 decades worth of violence that the Shah and Savak had waged on the people. So all this back and forth. You have the Shah on one hand and his secret police. You have the religious Ayatollah on the other, and all these people are trying to fight each other now. There's also different groups jostling for power, and it was just a disaster. And a lot of the people, a lot of the foreigners that worked there, who worked in the oil fields, um, were were particularly feeling the brunt of this, and they were looking at ways to get out. There's a great book from one of my favorite authors, James Clavell, whose most famous book is called Shogun, about Japan and during the times of the Shogun. But he wrote a book called Whirlwind, and it's a very long book. I listened to it on Audible, and it's like 50 hours long. But it was really good. It was a really good book. So if you want to look into that, James Clavell's Whirlwind, or just maybe read the review of it about the workers, the foreign workers in Iran during the time of the revolution, trying to get out and trying to take their like helicopters and all their material and stuff from the oil rigs with them. Okay, so the Ayatollah takes over. The Shah is in America. Ayatollah demands America to return the Shah so that he can face punishment. But the United States, under this time, was President Jimmy Carter, who was known as like a human rights president. He was not a very effective president. He kind of goes down in the history books as one of the worst. The economy was really bad during his administration, but he did not give the Shah back to Iran to face judgment. And when historians looked into the reasons why, or why political scientists looked into the reasons why, the reason was that the United States was backing so many other dictators in the world that if we gave back the Shah when he was facing difficulties, all of the other little dictators in the world that America was supporting would have gotten very scared and maybe would have abandoned their pro-American positions because they would have understood, wow, all that has to happen is some social and political upheaval in our country, and America's going to abandon us to the wolves. Because the Shah knew